The morning started like any other for Jake Thompson. He packed his lunch, checked his equipment, and headed out to the remote mining site where he'd been working alone for the past 2 weeks. The asteroid belt facility was quiet, almost peaceful, with nothing but the hum of life support systems keeping him company. Jake was a geologist, someone who studied rocks and minerals. His job was simple: find valuable materials that could be mined from this floating chunk of space rock. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well, and Jake enjoyed the solitude. No office politics, no traffic jams, just him and the endless, expansive space. As he made his way through the outer sectors of the facility, something caught his eye. A strange metallic gleam reflected off his helmet light, coming from behind a cluster of mining equipment. At first, he thought it might be a piece of machinery that had broken off during the recent storms, but as he got closer, his heart began to race. It wasn't machinery at all. It was a craft unlike anything he'd ever seen before. The ship was smooth and curved, made of what looked like liquid silver that had been frozen in time. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly, even though the craft appeared damaged. A large crack ran along one side, and Jake could see that whatever this thing was, it had crash-landed hard. His first instinct was to back away. This wasn't supposed to be here. Nothing like this was supposed to exist. But curiosity got the better of him, and he slowly approached the mysterious vessel. As he rounded the front of the craft, he froze in complete shock. There, lying motionless on the cold ground, was a being unlike anything from Earth. At first glance, it looked almost human in shape: 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But that's where the similarities ended. The creature's skin had a blue tint to it, almost like the color of deep ocean water. Instead of regular skin, it was covered in what looked like tiny crystal scales that caught the light and made rainbow patterns. But what really made Jake's stomach drop was the dark blue liquid pooling around the creature. Blood. This thing was bleeding, and from the looks of it, had been for quite some time. The being's chest rose and fell in shallow, painful breaths. It was alive, but barely. Jake stood there for what felt like forever, his mind racing. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to run, to get back to his ship, call for help, and let someone else deal with this situation. This was clearly way above his pay grade. He was just a rock collector, not a first contact specialist. But then the creature moved slightly, and Jake heard something that made his blood run cold. It was a sound of pain, soft, weak, but undeniably real. This wasn't some monster or threat. This was a living being in terrible agony, slowly dying alone on a cold asteroid. Jake had always been the kind of person who couldn't walk past a hurt animal without stopping to help. His friends used to tease him about bringing home stray cats and injured birds. But this was different. This wasn't a cat or a bird. This was proof that humans weren't alone in the universe. And it was dying right in front of him. The creature's eyes suddenly opened, and Jake felt his breath catch. They were large and dark, like looking into a deep well at night. But there was something in those eyes that Jake recognized immediately. Intelligence, and more than that, there was fear. The same kind of fear he would feel if he were hurt and alone in a strange place. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Jake, the human geologist in his bulky space suit, and this mysterious being from who knows where. The creature tried to move, to maybe crawl away, but the effort clearly caused it more pain. It let out another soft sound and closed its eyes. Again, that's when Jake made the decision that would change everything. He couldn't just walk away. He couldn't leave this being to die alone, no matter where it came from or what it might mean for humanity. Every decent part of his soul told him there was only one right thing to do. He keyed his radio and thought about calling for help, but then stopped. What would he even say? How do you explain finding an alien on a routine mining survey? And what if the authorities decided this creature was a threat? What if they wanted to study it rather than help it? No, Jake decided. He would have to handle this himself, at least for now. He looked around the crash site, noting how isolated it was. The main facility was over 2 miles away, and nobody else was scheduled to visit this sector for another week if he was going. To help this being, he had time to figure out how. Jake knelt down beside the creature, being careful not to make any sudden movements. Up close, he could see that the injuries were serious. The blue blood was coming from several wounds, and the being's breathing was getting weaker by the minute. He had some basic medical training from his safety courses, but nothing that had prepared him for alien biology. Still, bleeding was bleeding, right? The first step was always to stop the blood loss. Jake carefully removed his emergency medical kit from his belt and began to assess what he could do. The creature watched him with those dark eyes, and Jake could swear he saw a flicker of hope in them. "Hey there," Jake said softly, his voice echoing in his helmet. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I'm going to try to help you, okay? Just hang in there." As if responding to his words, the creature's skin began to show faint patterns of light, almost like a gentle pulse. Jake had no idea what it meant, but something told him it wasn't a threat. Maybe it was the being's way of saying thank you, or maybe it was trying to communicate something important. Either way, Jake knew there was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and whatever happened next would change both of their lives forever. Jake knew he had to move fast. The alien creature was losing too much blood, and he could see its breathing getting weaker. First things first, he needed to get it somewhere safe and clean, where he could actually try to help. The mining facility had a small medical bay that Jake had set up for emergencies. It wasn't much, just basic supplies and a clean table, but it would have to do. The problem was getting the injured being there. Without making things worse, Jake looked around and spotted a transport sled used for moving heavy equipment. He carefully maneuvered it next to the creature, then gently lifted the alien onto it. The being was surprisingly light, and its skin felt warm despite looking so different from human skin. Those strange crystal scales weren't hard like he expected. They were actually soft, almost like tiny feathers. As he moved the sled toward the facility, Jake kept talking softly. He had no idea if the creature could understand him, but it seemed to calm down when he spoke. "We're going to get you fixed up. Don't worry. I know this is scary, but I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's eyes stayed focused on Jake's face. Through his helmet visor, those dark eyes seemed so intelligent, so aware. It was like looking at a person who just happened to look completely different. Once inside the medical bay, Jake faced his biggest challenge yet. He had bandages, antiseptic, and pain medication designed for humans. But would any of it work on an alien? What if something that helped humans actually harmed this being? He decided to start with the basics. Clean the wounds, stop the bleeding, and hope for the best. Jake washed his hands thoroughly and put on gloves, just like he'd been taught in his first aid courses. The creature watched his every move, those glowing patterns on its skin pulsing faster now. When Jake gently touched the area around the largest wound, the being flinched but didn't try to pull away. It was almost like it understood that Jake was trying to help. The blue blood was sticky and thicker than human blood, but it clotted similarly when pressure was applied. "Okay, that's good," Jake muttered to himself as he pressed a clean cloth against the wound. "You feel kind of like we do. That's something." As he worked, something amazing happened. The creature slowly lifted one of its hands, which had long, delicate fingers ending in what looked like small crystals, and pointed to different supplies on the medical cart. At first, Jake thought it was random, but then he realized the being was actually trying to help guide his treatment. When Jake reached for a bottle of antiseptic, the creature shook its head and pointed to plain water instead. When he grabbed regular bandages, it gestured toward the elastic wrap. Somehow, this alien knew what would work best for its own body. "You're trying to help me help you," Jake said with wonder. "You actually understand what's happening here." The patterns of light under the creature's skin began changing, forming shapes that almost looked like symbols. They would appear, fade, then appear again in different combinations. Jake realized this might be how it communicated, through these living light patterns on its skin. After 2 hours of careful work, Jake had managed to clean and bandage all the visible wounds. The creature's breathing had improved, and the terrible blue bleeding had finally stopped. But Jake could tell it was still in pain and probably needed rest and time to heal. He pulled up a chair next to the medical table and sat down, exhausted. The reality of what had just happened was starting to hit him. He had just performed emergency medical care on an alien being, a real, living creature from somewhere else in the universe. And somehow, it had worked. The alien turned its head toward Jake and made a soft sound, not the pain noises from before, but something almost musical. Then those light patterns appeared again on its skin, but this time they were different, slower, more deliberate, and somehow Jake felt like they meant thank you. You're welcome, Jake said, even though he felt a bit silly talking to someone who probably couldn't understand English. But then something incredible happened. The creature's hand moved to its chest, and the light patterns changed again. This time, they formed what looked almost like a heart shape. Then the being pointed to Jake, and the same heart pattern appeared again. Jake's eyes widened. Are you showing me that you understand kindness? That you know I helped you? Because I cared? The creature's version of a smile was subtle, just a slight change in the way its features arranged themselves. But it was unmistakably a smile, and in that moment, Jake realized he wasn't just looking at an alien anymore. He was looking at a person, someone with thoughts and feelings, and the ability to recognize compassion when they saw it. Over the next few hours, Jake stayed by the creature's side, checking its bandages and making sure it was comfortable. He brought it water, which it seemed grateful for, though it drank in a strange way, placing its crystal-tipped fingers in the liquid first, as if testing it. As the alien rested, Jake found himself studying its features more closely. Despite being so different from humans, there was something almost familiar about it. The way it moved its hands when trying to communicate, the way its eyes showed curiosity and intelligence, the way it seemed to understand emotions like gratitude and trust. Jake pulled out his personal tablet and started showing the creature pictures from Earth, mountains, oceans, cities, animals. The being's eyes grew wide with fascination, and it started pointing at things that seemed to interest it most. When Jake showed it a picture of his cat back home, the creature made that musical sound again and touched its own chest, then pointed to the image. Do you have pets where you come from? Jake asked. Or maybe something like family? The light patterns on the creature's skin became more complex, showing what looked like multiple figures standing together. Jake felt a chill as he realized what this might mean. This being wasn't alone. Somewhere out there, others like it probably existed, and they might be looking for their missing friend. As if reading his thoughts, the creature pointed upward, toward the ceiling and the stars beyond. Then it made a gesture that looked like counting, holding up fingers in groups, over and over. Lots of others. And then it pointed to itself and made a sad expression. You're lost, Jake said softly. You're hurt and lost and far from home. Just like I would be if I crashed on your world. The creature nodded, actually nodded, just like a human would. And in that simple gesture, Jake understood something profound. Despite coming from different worlds, different species, they could still understand each other. They could still connect through the most basic emotions that thinking beings shared. Fear, pain, gratitude, hope. And now, sitting in this small medical bay on a remote asteroid, Jake realized his life had just changed forever. Not just because he had met an alien, but because he had met someone who was counting on him to help them survive in a strange and dangerous place. The question now was, what would he do next? 3 days had passed since Jake found the injured alien, and something amazing was happening. What started as a desperate rescue mission had turned into the most incredible experience of his life. The creature was getting stronger each day, and they were actually starting to understand each other. Jake had decided to call his new friend Blue because of the beautiful blue tint to its skin. He knew it probably had a real name in whatever language its people spoke, but Blue seemed to like the nickname every time Jake said it. Those light patterns on Blue's skin would pulse in what Jake had learned was the equivalent of a smile. The communication breakthrough came on the second day. Jake was showing Blue pictures on his tablet when he had an idea. He pointed to himself and said Jake several times. Then he pointed to Blue and waited. After a moment, Blue's skin lit up with a complex pattern of symbols that appeared and faded in sequence. When Jake tried to copy the pattern by drawing it on paper, Blue got excited and repeated it. "So that's your name," Jake said, looking at the beautiful flowing symbols he'd sketched. "I can't pronounce it, but I can see it. That's pretty cool." From there, they developed a basic way to talk. Blue would create light patterns for different ideas, and Jake would show pictures or act things out. It was like the world's strangest game of charades. But it worked. What really amazed Jake was how smart Blue was. Not just intelligent, but curious about everything. Blue wanted to know about Jake's work, about Earth, about humans in general. When Jake showed videos of cities and people, Blue's eyes went wide with fascination. When Jake played music, Blue would close its eyes and those light patterns would dance across its skin in rhythm with the beat. "You like music," Jake observed, watching Blue's reaction to a classical piece. "Your people must have music too." Blue's response was incredible. It placed its hand flat on the metal table and somehow made the surface vibrate, creating a haunting melody that was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. The sound was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. It made Jake think of looking up at stars and wondering what was out there. "That's amazing," Jake whispered. "How did you do that?" Blue pointed to the crystal-like tips on its fingers, then to Jake's tablet. It took Jake a moment to understand, but then it clicked. "You can control vibrations, can't you? That's how you made the music. And that's probably how you're healing so fast too." Over the next day, Blue began sharing more about its people. Using the light patterns and simple drawings, Blue showed Jake images of a world with crystal cities that seemed to grow from the ground like beautiful trees. There were others like Blue there, living in harmony with their environment, studying the stars, and exploring space not to conquer but to learn. "You're explorers," Jake said, understanding. "Like scientists, you travel around just to discover new things." Blue's enthusiastic light display confirmed it. Then Blue showed him something that made Jake's heart race. A pattern that clearly represented multiple star systems, with paths drawn between them. Blue pointed to one area, then to itself, then traced a path to another section where it pointed upward toward where Earth would be. "You came here on purpose," Jake realized. "Earth wasn't just some random stop. You came here to study us, didn't you?" Blue's response was more complex. The light patterns showed what looked like many of its people gathered together, with some pointing toward Earth's direction and others pointing away. Then Blue showed images of Earth from space, with small symbols that might have represented spacecraft watching from a distance. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You've been watching us. Your people have been studying humans for a while now." Blue nodded, then showed him more patterns. These seemed to represent different groups of Blue's people having what looked like arguments or debates. Some wanted one thing, others wanted something else. "You're not all in agreement about something," Jake said slowly. "Something about Earth. About us." Blue's skin dimmed slightly, and the patterns became more serious. It showed Jake images that seemed to represent Blue's people divided into two groups. One group pointing toward Earth with welcoming gestures, the other group pointing away with what looked like warning signs. "Some of your people want to meet us, but others think it's a bad idea," Jake interpreted. "And you came here to what? To see for yourself what humans are really like." Blue's response was a single, clear pattern that pulsed brightly. Yes, the weight of what Blue was telling him started to sink in. This wasn't just about one injured alien. This was about first contact between two entire species. And somehow, Jake's decision to help Blue was going to play a role in determining what happened next. "So what do you think?" Jake asked quietly. "Now that you've met a human, what's your opinion of us?" Blue looked at Jake for a long moment, then created the most beautiful light pattern Jake had seen yet. It started with a representation of Jake finding Blue bleeding and afraid. Then it showed Jake's kindness, his care, his willingness to risk everything to help a complete stranger. The pattern ended with symbols that Jake had learned meant friendship, trust, and hope. "You think we're good," Jake said, feeling emotion well up in his chest. "Because I helped you, you think humans are good." Blue reached out and gently touched Jake's hand. The contact sent a warm, tingling sensation up his arm, and for just a moment, Jake could swear he felt what Blue was feeling. Gratitude so deep it was overwhelming, friendship that transcended species, and something else, a sense of responsibility. You're going to tell your people about this, aren't you? Jake asked. About me helping you? You're going to recommend that they make contact with humans. Blue's light patterns confirmed it, but then showed something else that made Jake's stomach drop. Images of other spacecraft moving toward their location. Blue pointed upward, then held up fingers. 5. Then, it gestured in a circle around them. 5 ships are coming here, Jake realized. Your people found you. But Blue wasn't finished. It showed more patterns, these representing human spacecraft as well. Both groups were coming, and they would arrive soon. Human ships too, Jake breathed. Someone must have detected your crash or picked up some kind of signal. Blue nodded gravely, then showed Jake one final set of patterns. These were the most complex yet, showing the 2 groups of ships meeting, with Jake and Blue in the middle. The pattern ended with a question mark symbol that Blue had learned from watching Jake write. You're asking me what I think will happen when they get here, Jake said. What I think we should do. Blue nodded again, those intelligent dark eyes fixed on Jake's face. In that moment, Jake realized that the most important decision in human history might be about to fall on the shoulders of a simple geologist who just wanted to help someone in need. The question was no longer whether humans and Blue's people would meet. The question was how that meeting would go, and what role Jake's friendship with Blue would play in shaping the future of both their species. As if sensing Jake's thoughts, Blue created one more light pattern. This one was simple but clear. It showed 2 figures standing together, one human-shaped and one like Blue, with symbols of peace and friendship surrounding them. You want us to be allies, Jake said softly. You want our people to be friends. Like we are. Blue's skin glowed brightly with agreement, but they both knew that what they wanted and what would actually happen when those ships arrived might be 2 very different things. The next few hours would determine the fate of 2 worlds. The alarm started blaring at 6 a.m. on the 4th day. Jake jolted awake from his makeshift bed next to Blue's recovery area and rushed to the main control panel. His heart sank as he read the displays. Multiple ships were approaching the asteroid, some from Earth's direction, others from deep space. They found us, Jake whispered, looking back at Blue, who was now sitting up and creating urgent light patterns across its skin. Blue pointed to the scanner readings, then made gestures that Jake had learned meant soon and many. The ships would arrive within hours, and there would be a lot of them. Blue's rescue signal had finally worked, but it had also alerted human space monitoring systems. Jake's radio crackled to life. Mining Station Delta 7, this is Commander Rodriguez. From Earth Defense Station, we've detected an authorized spacecraft in your sector. Please respond immediately. Jake stared at the radio, his hand hovering over the transmit button. This was it, the moment that would change everything. He could tell them the truth right now, that he had found and rescued an injured alien being. Or he could lie, say he hadn't seen anything, and tried to protect Blue until they figured out what to do. Blue seemed to understand what was happening. It moved over to Jake and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Those dark eyes looked directly into Jake's, and the light patterns on Blue's skin formed a message Jake had learned to recognize. Your choice. Commander Rodriguez, this is Jake Thompson at Delta 7. He finally responded. I'm here and safe. What kind of unauthorized spacecraft are you talking about? We're tracking 5 unknown vessels approaching your position. They're not responding to our hails and don't match any known ship designs. Have you seen anything unusual? Jake closed his eyes. One simple no, and he could buy more time. But Blue was creating new light patterns now, and Jake realized his friend was trying to tell him something important. The patterns showed images of Blue's people, some angry, some peaceful, all watching and waiting. Jake, Blue had learned to say his name, though it came out more musical than human speech. They fear, your people, my people, fear makes bad choices. You're right, Jake said quietly. Everyone's scared because they don't know what's happening. Blue showed him more patterns, images of the approaching ships, both human and alien, with symbols that clearly meant weapons ready. Both sides were prepared for a fight because both sides were afraid. Commander Rodriguez, Jake, said into the radio, "I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen to the whole story before you do anything. Go ahead, Thompson." Jake took a deep breath. "4 days ago, I found a crashed spacecraft. There was a survivor, an alien being who was badly injured. I've been treating its wounds and, well, we've become friends." The silence on the radio stretched for what felt like forever. Finally, Rodriguez's voice came back, tight with tension. "Repeat that, Thompson. Did you say alien?" "Yes, sir. The being is peaceful, intelligent, and has been trying to communicate with its people. Those ships you're tracking, some of them are probably coming to rescue their friend, Thompson. You need to secure that area immediately. Do not, I repeat, do not make any further contact with the alien. We're sending a full military response team." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Sir, with respect, I don't think that's a good idea. This being hasn't shown any hostile intentions. In fact, it's been trying to help me understand its people's peaceful nature. That's not your call to make, Thompson. You're a civilian who's in way over his head. Secure the alien and wait for backup." Jake looked at Blue, who had been listening to the conversation. Blue's skin had turned darker, and the light patterns were rapid and agitated. Blue pointed to the approaching ships on the scanner, then made gestures that clearly meant danger. "Commander, please listen." Jake tried again. "This being's people have been watching Earth for a long time. They're debating whether to make peaceful contact with us. How we handle this situation is going to determine whether we gain allies or enemies." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because we've been communicating. It taught me its language, and I've learned about its civilization. They're explorers, not conquerors. But they're also watching to see how humans treat someone who's vulnerable and helpless." Blue suddenly grabbed Jake's arm and pointed urgently at the scanner. The alien ships had changed course and were now moving much faster. Blue's light patterns were frantic as it tried to explain something. "What is it?" Jake asked. Blue showed him patterns that made Jake's blood run cold. The alien ships had detected the approaching human military vessels and were interpreting them as a threat. They thought their friend was being held prisoner. "Commander," Jake said urgently into the radio, "the alien ships are speeding up. I think they believe we're holding their friend against its will. If they see military ships surrounding the station, we're prepared for any hostile action." "Thompson, that's exactly the problem," Jake shouted. "Don't you see? We're about to start an interstellar war because everyone's too scared to try talking first." Blue tugged on Jake's sleeve and began creating the most complex light pattern Jake had ever seen. It showed to groups facing each other, weapons drawn, with destruction spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Then it showed a different scene, the same to groups, but with figures walking toward each other with open hands. "Blue's showing me to possible futures," Jake said into the radio. "One where we fight because we're afraid, and one where we meet as friends because we choose to trust each other. Thompson, you're emotionally compromised. Step away from the alien and prepare for evacuation." Jake looked at Blue, whose skin was now pulsing with urgent patterns. Blue pointed to Jake, then to the radio, then made a gesture that Jake recognized. Blue was asking Jake to make a choice, not just for himself, but for both their species. "Commander Rodriguez," Jake said slowly, "I'm going to make a suggestion, and I need you to hear me out. Let me serve as a mediator." "Blue, that's what I call the alien. Trust me, and his people will see that we've been taking care of their friend, not harming them. Absolutely not. You're not trained for diplomatic contact." "Maybe that's exactly why it needs to be me," Jake replied. "I'm not a soldier or a politician. I'm just a guy who found someone hurt and decided to help." Blue's people need to see that humans can be kind to strangers, even when we're scared. Blue was nodding vigorously, its skin glowing with approval. It created new patterns showing Jake standing between the two groups of ships, with symbols of peace radiating outward. The alien wants me to do this, Jake continued. It believes I can help both sides understand each other. And honestly, Commander, what's the alternative? We're outnumbered, we're on their territory, and we've got their friend. The only way this ends peacefully is if we show them we're willing to talk. The radio was quiet for a long moment. When Rodriguez's voice came back, it was grim. Thompson, if you're wrong about this, you could be starting a war that destroys both our species. Jake looked at Blue, who reached out and took his hand. The warm, tingling sensation flowed between them, and Jake felt his friend's absolute faith. In him, Commander, Jake said firmly, if I'm right, I could be starting the greatest friendship in the history of the universe. Blue believes in me, and I believe in Blue. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. The alien ships will be here in 30 minutes, Thompson. Our fleet arrives in 45. Whatever you're going to do, you better do it fast. Jake squeezed Blue's hand and made his decision. Tell your ships to hold position, but keep their weapons powered down. I'm going to try to arrange the first peaceful meeting between humans and aliens, and Commander, pray that we get this right. As Jake signed off, Blue created one final light pattern. It was simple but clear, two figures embracing. Surrounded by stars, the fate of two worlds now rested on the friendship between a human geologist and an alien explorer, who had learned to trust each other against all odds. The next 20 minutes felt like the longest of Jake's life. He could see both fleets approaching on his scanner, the sleek, curved alien ships moving like silverfish through space, and the angular human vessels bristling with weapons and sensors at any moment. One wrong move could turn this into a battle that would echo across the galaxy. Blue stood beside Jake at the communication station, its skin glowing with complex patterns that Jake now understood meant hope mixed with worry. They had worked out a plan, but it all depended on both sides being willing to listen instead of shoot first. Alien vessels. This is Commander Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are in violation of our space territory. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Jake winced at the harsh tone. This wasn't how you talked to someone you wanted to be friends with. But before he could say anything, Blue placed its hand on the communication panel and did something amazing. The entire station filled with the most beautiful sound Jake had ever heard. It was like music, but also like language, flowing tones and harmonies that seemed to speak directly to the heart. Blue was responding to the human ships in its own language, and somehow Jake could feel the meaning behind the sounds. Peace, friendship. We come seeking our lost family member. The alien ships responded with similar musical tones, and Jake watched in wonder as the entire fleet slowed down and arranged themselves in what was clearly a peaceful formation. No weapons pointed forward. Ships spread apart to show they weren't preparing for attack. Thompson, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. What was that? Blue just told them we're friends, Jake replied. The alien ships are standing down. They're not here to fight, Commander. They just want their friend back. How do we know? This isn't some kind of trick. Jake looked at Blue, who nodded encouragingly. Because, sir, I'm about to prove it to you. Blue has agreed to serve as a translator for both sides. We're going to have the first peaceful conversation between humans and aliens in history. What happened next was something Jake would remember for the rest of his life. Blue's people chose one ship to come closer to the station, while the human fleet maintained a respectful distance. When the alien vessel docked with the mining facility, Jake felt his heart racing with excitement and terror. The airlock opened, and three beings like Blue stepped through. They were taller than Blue, with more elaborate patterns on their skin, but their eyes held the same intelligence and curiosity that Jake had come to recognize in his friend. Blue rushed forward and embraced the newcomers, their skin patterns synchronizing in what was clearly a joyful reunion. Then Blue turned back to Jake and created light patterns that introduced him to the others. One of the aliens stepped forward and looked directly at Jake. When it spoke, its voice was like Blue's, musical and warm, but somehow Jake could understand the meaning. You are the one who saved our young explorer, the being said, and Jake realized Blue must have taught them some human language. Blue has told us much about your kindness. I just did what anyone would do, Jake replied, though he knew that wasn't entirely true. No, the alien leader said firmly. Blue has shown us recordings of your actions. You had many choices when you found our friend bleeding and afraid. You could have run away. You could have called for your military. You could have studied Blue like a specimen. Instead, you chose compassion. Jake felt tears welling up in his eyes as he realized what was happening. Blue was recording everything. Blue's skin glow with what Jake had learned was embarrassment. I had to document first contact for my people. But Jake, you passed every test without knowing you were being tested. The alien leader continued. For many cycles, our people have watched your species. We have seen great kindness and terrible cruelty. We have debated whether humans were ready to join the greater community of intelligent life in the galaxy, and Jake asked, hardly daring to breathe, your treatment of Blue has answered that question. If a human can show such care for a strange being from an unknown world, then humans have the capacity for the empathy required to be part of our alliance. Over the station's communication system, Commander Rodriguez had been listening to everything. Are you offering us membership in some kind of galactic community? The alien leader turned toward the communication panel. We are offering friendship. We are offering to share knowledge that could help your world solve many problems, disease, energy shortages, environmental damage, in exchange. We ask only for the same friendship that Jake has shown to Blue. Jake felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Everything that happened next, humanity's future among the stars, the solutions to Earth's problems, the prevention of war between species, all of it had started because he couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. But why me? Jake asked. Why didn't you make contact through governments or scientists? Because, Blue said, its patterns glowing warmly, we needed to see what humans do when no one is watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, no benefit to themselves. We needed to see if humans help others simply because it's right. The alien leader nodded. Blue's mission was to test human character in the most basic way possible. Would a human help a dying stranger, even when that stranger was completely alien? You proved that the answer is yes. 6 months later, Jake found himself standing in the United Nations building, watching as Blue served as the first alien ambassador to Earth. The friendship that had started in a lonely mining station had grown into a partnership that was transforming both worlds. Human diseases were being cured with alien medical knowledge. Earth's environmental problems were being solved with advanced alien technology. And in return, humans were sharing their art, music, and culture with a galaxy of species that had been waiting to meet them. But the most important change was simpler than that. Children on Earth were growing up knowing they weren't alone in the universe, that there were friends among the stars who valued kindness above everything else. Jake often thought about that moment when he first found Blue bleeding in the wreckage. How easily he could have walked away. How different everything would have been if he had chosen fear over compassion. At the official ceremony establishing the Human-Alien Alliance, Blue stood beside Jake as he addressed the world leaders and alien representatives. I'm not a diplomat or a scientist, Jake said into the microphone. I'm just a guy who found someone who needed help. But I've learned something important from my friend Blue and from all of you. The universe is a big, scary place, but it's also full of people who want to be kind to each other. Jake looked out at the audience, humans and aliens sitting together, already beginning to form the friendships that would shape the future. The choice to help someone shouldn't depend on where they come from or what they look like. It should depend on one simple question: is someone in need? And if the answer is yes, then the choice is easy. Blue's skin glowed with pride and friendship as Jake concluded. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest consequences, and sometimes saving one life can change the entire galaxy. As the applause filled the great hall, Jake realized that his simple decision to help a stranger had indeed shocked the galaxy. Not because it was unusual, but because it proved that humans were ready to be part of something much bigger than themselves. The universe had been waiting for proof that humanity was ready for the stars. They found it in the actions of one ordinary person who chose to care.